Hello, I'm Ellen Bintz, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois, in the USA. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Leigh-on-Sea in the UK. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's April 15th, 2025.
The Netflix series Adolescence has had a significant global impact since its release just under 1 month ago. The British psychological crime drama explores themes of teenage violence, online misogyny, and radicalization, sparking widespread discussion around what are major social ills for many countries. Now, without giving too much away, and you certainly don't need to have seen the series to tune in with this podcast and to understand the issues. The series begins with armed police, quite heavy-handedly as far as I
Yes.
raiding the home of a cowering, small 13-year-old boy in his teenage bedroom who has been accused of murdering a young girl in his school, and ends with highlighting the rawness of his broken family's grief and struggle to understand what has happened. Its true-to-life depiction of the toxic online culture, sometimes known as the manosphere, powerfully reveals how common teenage male insecurities around perceived attractiveness and romantic failure can flip into a resentment and hatred of the opposite sex. Girls face great peer pressure and challenges too, of course, and I'm sure we'll be looking at those in a future episode. But aiming to be specific, as we always are in each episode this week, it's the crisis involving teenage boys that we're keeping firmly in our sights.
The series has been a massive hit worldwide, attracting over 96 million viewers in its first 3 weeks and leading the Netflix charts in nearly all 93 countries, tracked by the media platform in countries as far as Brazil, Iran, and India.
That's extraordinary.
That's amazing.
It is.
Right.
It just shows that this is not unique to, for example, Western societies. It's a major issue all around the world.
Right.
Some of the reasons we'll explore, obviously, why that is, but yeah.
And it's, as we were talking before we started recording, one of the things we love about our podcast is the different views you and I have being across the pond from each other. And this is an instance where it feels like everyone's feeling the same way.
Yeah. It's really struck a chord, hasn't it? It's really provoked the consciousness of many, many countries, many societies. In my own backyard, in the UK, I know the series has resonated deeply here, sparking debates like we're having, and people will be having around the dinner table, but I think that's part of the problem. That doesn't happen in many families these days.
And it's set in the UK too, right?
It is. It's set in northern England. I think it was Doncaster, the southern city of Yorkshire, city of Doncaster, somewhere in the north of England. And the family portrayed were from Liverpool originally. They certainly had Liverpool accents and spoke about going back to Liverpool. It has, in the media as well, it's really provoked quite a strong national debate, and in Parliament, with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer publicly endorsing the show after watching it with his own teenage children and advocating for its use in schools to foster discussions about online radicalization and violence. And to Netflix's credit, this is a move that's been greatly helped by their decision to make the series available to all secondary schools in the UK. I think they have a special platform for doing that. And there's a relationship charity here also, Tender, which produces guides and resources for teachers, parents, and carers who are working to provide materials for them to help navigate conversations around the series. As I was saying to you, Ellen, earlier, I'm myself. One of the things we often get provoked, don't we? We say, what can I do? That's our strapline. And of course, holding intention prayers is important, but it's provoked me to think, can I do something around offering meditation for my old school, for example? I don't know. I'm struggling with that one because I'm not very wise when it comes to dealing with classrooms are full of teenagers, but we will see. We will see.
I bet you'd be great.
We will see. The police in the UK and elsewhere have used the show already as an opportunity to raise awareness about the dangers of online radicalization among youth. For example, in Portugal, this looks particularly useful to me, and we'll put a link to this in the show notes, along with a whole load of other resources that we've come across, help sources in different countries on the issues covered. They produced a guide for parents to decode emojis used by teenagers, which was a total wake up for me seeing this program. I had no idea. Reflecting concerns raised in the series about what essentially is a hidden, secretive online communication. Similar resources are aimed at helping parents understand and improve communication with their children are being promoted in Australia and in other countries.
Yeah, the series has triggered conversations about the pressures faced by young men in many countries. Its exploration of involuntary celibate culture, which is the term where the term incel comes from, and toxic online environments has been particularly impactful. It's highlighted the power of social media to facilitate feelings of inadequacy, including this emoji code we talked about, and vocabulary that's commonly understood by young people, but which remains largely unknown or not understood by their elders, which is probably by plan.
Yeah.
It has also brought home the pressure cooker of rage harbored by many young people, not to mention by many adults, too. So this week, we look at how we, as a prayer and intention holding community, might respond to what is a very pertinent and clearly global issue. Of course, it's not necessary to have seen the series to get to the heart of this, as we said. We begin our time of shared intention holding and prayers later, but first, to set the scene, or as a reminder, what are the key issues raised by the series and relating to the influence of the manosphere on teenage boys in general?
Well, the series has highlighted several critical challenges facing young people in the digital age, which include, as we mentioned, toxic masculinity and misogyny, the impact of social media, online radicalization, gender-based violence, young boys' mental health, and failures in communication and adult role models. Viewers see how social expectations of masculinity can lead to harmful behaviors, even to the death of some. Jamie, who is the 13-year-old protagonist of the series, displays a sense of entitlement and frustration after being rejected by his classmate, Katie. He is influenced by a misogynistic community, which normalizes hostility towards women and perpetuates harmful ideologies. Katie's mocking comments and the circulation of her private photos on social media play a pivotal role in the narrative, showing how online interactions can have devastating real-world consequences. And the photos that circulate, I was thinking especially now, we hear these stories of manipulated AI, manipulated photographs, don't we? Of
Yes.
people that are doing the rounds as well. My goodness, this is certainly in our generation. This is not a problem we had to encounter.
Absolutely. So the series delves into the dangers of social media, portraying how platforms can amplify bullying, spread harmful content, as we said, and escalate conflicts. This points especially to the dangers of the so-called manosphere, a toxic online space where young men are exposed to radical ideologies that glorify misogyny and violence. These online communities often promote anti-feminist and male supremacist ideologies, often framing women as obstacles to male success and propagating discriminatory views through so-called humor, memes, and pseudoscientific claims. Basically fiction. Narratives like the 80-20 rule, which claims that 80% of women are attracted only to the top 20% of men, this actually made me laugh when I read this
Mm.
the first time, perpetuate harmful stereotypes and encourage extreme measures like looks maxing, which includes physical alterations or surgeries. Young males are particularly susceptible to these narratives.
Mm. In the real world, many boys have turned to the manosphere due to a lack of clear guidance on healthy masculinity. This so-called crisis of connection has left them searching for role models online where they encounter influencers who exploit their insecurities for personal gain. We mentioned Andrew Tate, didn't we, in the recent episode we did on violence against women.
Yes.
A need for social acceptance drives many boys to conform to group norms. And these online communities, but also real communities within schools, are readily accessible to most. Boys who repeat manosphere talking points in schools have led to increased sexism towards female students and staff, with such narratives having the power to profoundly condition adolescents' perceptions of relationships and gender roles. And in extreme cases, this can potentially lead to gender-based violence and, as we saw in the series, homicide.
Quite apart from the risk of conditioning in the manosphere, the physical changes boys undergo during puberty can lead to insecurities about height, muscle development, and appearance. Social media may play a role in exacerbating these issues by promoting unrealistic body standards through influencers and celebrities. We know this is a huge issue for teenage girls as well, of course. Peer teasing about appearance may lead boys to internalize negative comments and make unrealistic comparisons, leading to feelings of inadequacy.
Mm, mm,
Boys may also be exposed to cyberbullying or risky behaviors like sexting, that is, the sending, receiving, or exchanging sexually explicit or suggestive messages, images, or videos. One recent study in the UK reported that nearly half of teens report experiencing cyberbullying. There's also the challenge of balancing schoolwork, sports, extracurricular activities with the believed pressure to excel in all areas without having full control over their schedules or decisions. And that often overwhelms many teenage boys.
Teenagers are especially impressionable and susceptible to influence due to the unique developmental changes occurring in their brains. They experience heightened activation in brain regions associated with reward processing and social sensitivity, such as the prefrontal cortex and limbic system. This makes them more likely to prioritize immediate rewards over long-term benefits and increases the orientation towards peers, amplifying their susceptibility to influence, whether positive or negative. I was just thinking there, I've not researched this, but I imagine that gaming culture as well, which is all about
Yes.
incentivizing the rewards processing of the brain.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
I get this, even playing a game of solitaire on my phone when I'm sitting and waiting for a train or something, and oh my god, I could have another go. See if I can do a little bit better next time.
Yes. And
It's
and
very
those games are inherently really not great portrayal of
no,
women
no,
and violence, right?
ab-
So, and I
absolutely.
think
So,
they're not only all these brain things are happening, but their impulse control isn't developed either, which
mm,
leads to these actions. So, as in the program with Jamie, many adolescents also face mental health struggles, particularly those stemming from rejection, bullying, and societal pressures. And this points to the importance of understanding these challenges in a sensitive way and not rushing to demonize the boys or blame their parents without properly understanding the context. Recognizing and resisting damaging peer pressure also requires grit, that vital quality that we honed in on in our last episode. And sadly, this is also a quality that many young people lack.
mm, just bringing home how critical that is really to
Right.
yeah,
Right. Being grounded
yeah.
too.
Part of education. I mean, it really was lacking all of these social skills, I might call them, in my own education. There was none of this. It was all academic. And looking at what is on offer at the curriculum of my own school, old school just in the recent days. I was quite impressed, actually, that things do seem to have changed there. There is some real effort to try and give a more rounded grounding in some of these things. But I suspect that this grittiness and the things we spoke about and the disciplines, meditation and so on to help is lacking.
Well, and it pointed out to us, we're saying that it's not always the parent's fault. And it's not.
Oh,
There are all these other factors we're talking about. And yet in this show, they did point out that his father had a really bad temper and
yes.
modeled that for him. So it was just a piece of the puzzle. It's
Yep.
just a spoke on the wheel of how this all turns, and doesn't help.
No. So how is the problem different for the current generation, perhaps to our own generations or past generations? Some of these challenges have long existed, of course. However, today, adolescents face unique challenges that weren't as prevalent or weren't faced at all by previous generations, largely due, of course, to technological, but also social and environmental changes. This has seen an increase in rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide or intended suicide among adolescents, with recent research showing this is staggering. 42% of what are called Gen Z, that's the group of people born roughly between 1997 and 2012, so they came after millennials, and they come before what's now called Generation Alpha. I get lost.
Can we say Gen Z, just in case our
Gen
US
Z.
listeners or they
Ah,
don't know
yes,
what
of
Z
course.
is?
Gen Z. 42% of this group report persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness compared to 28% in previous generations. Excessive social media use, as we said, gaming and social media behaviors are most obviously linked to this decreasing well-being. But greater competition, the pressures to achieve high school grades and concerns about career, being one day able to own a home perhaps, in what is a very insecure, expensive and uncertain world, are creating truly, I'm not using this term lightly, chronic stress for young people in many countries.
Oh, absolutely. And then what are the issues facing parents and caregivers, teachers, and others responsible for supporting boys through their teen years? As we know, many young men lack positive adult role models. As I said, the father had a temper.
Mm, mm,
And there's often a gap in communication between generations about healthy relationships and emotional coping mechanisms. Parents and caregivers often don't know what goes on inside their child's bedroom or what's being said through emojis and youth slang online, nor do they know how to help their loved ones cope with what may be most a difficult period of change in their lives.
mm.
That's timeless, right? That's gone on forever.
Yep,
Except for what goes on behind the bedroom door. That's a little bit different now with the computers and
exactly.
phones.
Mm,
Doesn't even have to be behind the bedroom door with the phone. That can be anywhere.
yeah.
Caregivers, teachers, and parents face numerous challenges when supporting boys through adolescence. And as we know, significant physical, emotional, and social changes at this time can make boys more vulnerable to behavioral issues, mental health struggles, and academic disengagement. Hormonal changes and brain development often bring about heightened emotions and impulsive behavior, as we said, causing many boys to express frustration, anger, or self absorption, sometimes masking underlying insecurity or sadness. Risk taking behaviors such as substance abuse and fighting are also common among boys during this period, as we know.
That's interesting. I thought that there is the time when a lot of boys do actually take risks. That they like getting into fights or whatever. Yeah, really interesting. I have to say one other thing that struck me watching the series as well was what he's like in a secondary school. And I imagine very realistic, total
Yeah. Yeah.
mayhem and almost impossible to discipline.
Yeah.
And just the sheer disruption that was going on and lack of attention to what was being taught,
Lack of
um,
respect
lack of
to the
respect.
teachers.
Exactly. Very, very tough environments for the
Yes.
teachers. And also for the caregivers. We saw an episode in which there was a psychologist who was interviewing Jamie for a pre-sentencing report, and how she was affected as well. And you can just
That's
imagine
right.
how many teachers and so on well, they have to do their best to maintain their professional pose. Just actually the violent threats, there might be verbal violent threats that they're left with. Absolutely appalling, really,
Yes.
to appreciate. Now, it's known that boys tend to mature later than girls, and that's quite significant. It's around about 18 months to 2 years during this period, which is really quite significant. And they're less likely, boys to girls, to openly discuss their feelings, which can lead to withdrawal and for mental health issues such as depression and anxiety being unaddressed. As we said, strikingly, suicide rates among teenage boys are also significantly higher than for those of their female peers. And what's more, some boys display disruptive behavior disorders like oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. Because of this, caregivers often face difficulties recognizing the signs of distress in boys due to their tendency to internalize their emotions and presumably to channel that into risk-taking and fighting and letting out at other people. Outdated stereotypes like boys shouldn't cry discourage emotional vulnerability, with the result that many boys bottle up their feelings rather than seek out support. And even if they feel they want to talk, they often feel embarrassed or ill at ease during this with their nearest and dearest. I think most of us didn't we, with our that's probably not new, that one. And
Right.
they may not know who to turn to at school. Adolescence is also, of course, a time that's marked by a shift from heavy influence of the parents to peer-centered relationships. So as teenagers spend more time with peers and seek their acceptance, they become increasingly self-conscious and motivated to conform to group norms. And depending on how they are accepted by others, this can result in feelings of worthlessness or despair that may lead some boys to disengage from school or indeed from life altogether.
And perhaps unsurprisingly, parents and caregivers often feel overwhelmed by the demands of raising adolescent boys, particularly when they are unsure how to handle problematic behaviors. Their own stress can lead them to using ineffective strategies like shaming or punishment, which may further harm a boy's self esteem. It's not easy.
No.
If you are a parent or caregiver yourself of a boy passing through adolescence and unsure where to turn, we've suggested a number of possible resources to help in the show notes. Among some of the key recommendations are prioritizing your child's well-being over achieving high grades in their schoolwork, building trust and open communication to help boys feel supported and understood, and setting clear boundaries. In other words, balancing discipline with empathy when addressing risky behaviors. We can't help feel that we should add encouraging meditation among the coping strategies that might be taught, which parents themselves could also benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking just before when we started recording, you mentioned to me resources I wasn't aware of, specifically in this case to do with labyrinths, which we both have a mutual interest in, and supporting those who host labyrinth walks, but they would apply to other activities like hosting meditation groups and so on, I'm sure.
Tools. It's tools to teach kids how to manage their stress and express it too. So it's the Australian Labyrinth Network puts the materials together for World Labyrinth Day in educational settings. And they have some great stories and some unbelievable resources for teachers, for obviously parents could use them.
Fantastic. So we'll definitely
put it in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So what are the issues and where might we hone in with our intention and prayers? So this is, I mean, certainly for me, it was a series that, as it has done for so many people in so many countries, and I'm not someone that has teenage children, has close contact with them, really was a bit of a wake up to say, look, here's something that has got to be addressed. much more seriously.
I raised one boy and three girls who are adults now and was able to I'd skate through almost most of the online stuff. I didn't have to deal with that. I have huge empathy for parents who were having to deal with the screen time
Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah. So,
And the
yeah.
parents, I mean, this was another thing. And actually, your inspiration for John O'Donoghue, actually, do you remember the blessing for a parent whose child has just been committed of a
Yes.
crime, which related
Yes.
to contacts you had?
Yes.
That came home to me when we see in the series this familiar, when a teenager is accused of a serious crime, the parents get the blame, the
The
family are
sibling.
targeted,
Yeah.
the sibling, and there is, it's just horrible all round when that happens. And, they have the media camped out on their doorstep and all sorts of things like that. And no one, well, perhaps not no one, but few are ready, as it were, to go back and say, who will cast the first stone? How would I have done better in this situation? How would I have known what was going on in that bedroom? What these emojis mean? How would I have been a better parent? And how would I know what they were doing in their parenting? Were they sufficiently attentive and caring and loving and so on and doing their best?
Yeah. Who remember the parents have enough stress of their own,
Yes,
probably keeping
yes,
life together, especially in this
yes.
topsy-turvy world right now. There's enough stress to go around and
And they don't know
it's
what's going on in schools very often, do they? I mean, they'll have the parents' meetings once in a while, and there'll be a certain level of communication from the school, but by and large, it's left to the school to deal with, and teachers themselves won't know what's going on individuals' phones,
yeah.
and what's going
Yeah.
on. I mean, the sort of behind the bike shed kind of catcalling or whatever it is that's going on. Yeah, it's easy to point the blame. Easy
It
to point the
is.
blame.
It
Yeah.
is. And like we said, it's many factors that come together. It's not just one thing.
Mm. And how impressionable. I know myself, that age, you want to fit in, don't you? And if there's
Mm.
a charismatic leader in the group kind of thing, you don't want to, be the one picked out and subject to bullying and so on. So, as always, we now invite you to join us in holding a focus for our intentions and prayers. So, if you can, or you might want to bookmark this point in the podcast, there is a bookmark in the detail for the podcast if you want to come back to this. Taking a moment to come to a place where you feel able to be connected, to become present. And our suggestion here is that if there are people who may be affected by this, might be grandchildren, might be neighbors' children, it might be there's a local school, might be you have children of your own of this age. I want to hold them, or indeed to be drawn to the more general issue. This topic has raised many concerns for us, and doubtless others will be raised for you as well. Among what has come to us, let us hold intention for the following. Let us will that all boys coming into and through their adolescence will have meaningful exposure to the perils of succumbing to peer pressure in the manosphere, receive impactful teaching to help them come to a clear understanding of the implications of giving into false narratives, and have a readiness to accept the guidance of supportive adults.
For those who choose to resist negative influence, we ask for great courage and grit. For those boys who feel under intense peer pressure to conform to social expectations, to prove their manhood, to be mindful of the risks and resist succumbing to such influence.
We pray for a normalizing of an anti-manosphere culture among all generations.
We will that there will be a widespread wake up to any who advance toxic masculinity as a joke or for any other purpose, to become deeply conscious of the very serious consequences of such cheerleading.
We will for sensitive responses to the multiple issues raised by adolescents from lawmakers and law enforcers, recognizing the vulnerability of young boys to conditioning as well as the fear and abuse suffered by girls and teachers.
We ask for protection, guidance, and support for teachers, especially female teachers, who face regular abuse from students, often without impunity.
We will wisdom and holding for parents and caregivers of errant boys, including those who are slow to or who refuse to accept responsibility. We ask that they receive wisdom in how to act in what may be a new or more urgently needed role for them, and that they may be directed to appropriate guidance and sources of support. We ask for wisdom for caregivers to set clear boundaries while maintaining calmness and compassion.
We will for a deep conviction among the providers of social media platforms to recognize the part they can play in limiting hate speech, misinformation, and misogyny on their platforms.
And we hold in light the parents and caregivers whose sons or those in their care who have been convicted of a crime or are subject to discipline as a result of being influenced by toxic masculinity. We also ask for compassion among those who might ostracize, judge, or rush to criticize them.
So this week, as we contemplate the massive pressures and dangers faced by teenage boys and the response of their caregivers in the wake of the Adolescence drama series, we suggest holding as our main intention, we will that all who have influence in schools and on social media to recognize and be guided in their actions to foster a cultural change aimed at addressing the harmful conditioning of young boys who are exposed to the manosphere. Please join us in holding this. And remember, if you are a parent, caregiver, or teacher yourself who has responsibility for adolescent boys, we've included several sources of guidance in the show notes that might help you navigate this critical role.
That about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in my daily Insight Timer offerings and with Ellen in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out too for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us in Holding Intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. In the meantime, thank you, go well, stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Bintz and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.